Or how do I do it?
If we could have some people from the back, maybe front. Okay, now let's give a warm welcome to Marion, who will be introducing our next keynote speaker. Coming up next, a biologist, LEED certified, which means Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Not only does she fight to maintain sustainability, she has a professional degree in it at the University of Vermont. Being a dedicated woman who was trained by Al Gore on climate change and is mentoring the NGO, the Climate Reality Project. Director of No Planeta B, No Planet B, an agency that specializes in assisting organizations to reduce their environmental footprint. She encourages the people around her to work to make this planet a better place by reminding us that we don't have a second home. She currently leads an initiative, the U Climate, which aims to educate and inspire action on climate change to students and universities in Peru, in collaboration with MINAM and the Embassy of the United States. She fights our fights and is a role model to our community. Please give a warm welcome to Yoca and Rocha.
Bienvenidos! Welcome everyone! How's everybody doing?
Yeah.
I can't hear you! Alright, good. Alright, well I'm so excited and inspired to be here in front of all of you and to talk to you about probably what I mainly talk about in my household, and you can ask my daughter, she's somewhere around here. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and being here in front of you with all your projects and all your solutions really inspires me. And I want to open my laptop because then I can follow my thoughts. But anyway, I wanted to talk to you about probably what we consider to be the most challenging global issue we face as humanity. And for that, I wanted to first of all say that's me, Yoca. And I want to talk to you how all of us can be drivers of change, specifically from schools. But first, let's talk about really what our problem is. What are we facing? So this question is for all of you. What's the biggest global issue you think we face as humanity? Poverty, yes. It's a huge global issue. Do you think climate change affects poverty? Yes. The UN Secretary Ban Ki-moon once said, to really eradicate poverty, we first must tackle climate change. Because the most vulnerable people in the world are the ones that are most affected. So, if we know that global warming is probably the most the pressing, most urgent global issue of our time, and I do not like podiums, so I'm going to be moving on, because I want to make sure I see my slides and I can talk to you. Okay, so we know that global warming is probably the biggest pressing issue of our time. And WWF already pretty much acknowledged that at the rate that we continue, almost 1/3 of our mammals will be extinct by 2050. And those are land-based mammals. And what are we? Yes. So this is Earth in 1978, and this is Earth now. We can see huge changes, and we can see changes happening now. So my story goes that one day, maybe about 8 years ago, I saw him, this man, and I saw his movie, An Inconvenient Truth. Anybody seen that movie? Raise your hand. And if not, put it on your bucket list. It's a good one. It's been a while. It's about 8 years old, but still very important film. So this man has an NGO called the Climate Reality Project. So I decided to do something about it. After I saw his film, I realized that even though I was a biologist and a concerned citizen, responsible citizen, I recycle, I took my bags to the supermarket, I did whatever, changed my light bulbs, I did everything I thought I could do as a responsible citizen. And I decided to do more after seeing An Inconvenient Truth and joined the Climate Reality Project. Trained myself as a climate reality leader, got my degree, and started what has been the past 8 years a beautiful journey to protect what we call our planet home. And this planet right here, it's about the same age as I am. This picture was taken by NASA in 1972. Now you know how old I am, and I don't like saying that, but it puts in perspective the actual and delicate state our planet is at the current moment. And you're going to see how global warming has affected our world in the past few hundreds of years. And since 1884 to 2011, you can see how gradually our planet has been warming up. And you can see as the shade gets darker, you can see that our Earth temperature has increased almost to close to, in some cases, to a degree and a half. So that puts a little bit of urgency to all of us. And this beautiful cross that we see here, this beautiful, thin, fragile cross that covers and protects our planet, it's called an atmosphere. And that atmosphere is very, very thin. But we're changing the composition of the atmosphere by all the greenhouse gas pollution that we're putting into our air. And I'm sure that you've heard the fact that obviously climate change can happen, and it's been seen all over the world. And this map actually represents all the recent global warming activities and climate change related incidents that has happened in the world in the past 2-3 years. Now, we know that greenhouse gases create global warming, but I want to make sure you understand the actual concept, and I want to make sure you actually understand what the greenhouse effect is and how the actual science of it is. So hopefully, you do that.
Despite the noise about uncertainty in the political arena,
Warming will actually save lives, not endanger them.
do I believe scientists? No! The fundamentals of climate change have been understood by scientists for decades. To start with, there are naturally occurring gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane in the Earth's atmosphere. In themselves, they aren't bad. In fact, we need them in limited quantities to keep our atmosphere at just the right temperature for life as we know it to exist on Earth. But if we produce an excess of these gases, as we have, the temperature rises, as it has. If you want, you could replicate this effect yourself in a simple lab experiment. Here's how. Take 2 identical bottles and set them side by side. Put a thermometer in each bottle and seal them. Then run a hose from a source of CO2 into one of the bottles. Shine 2 heat lamps of equal intensity at equal distance onto each one. Within minutes, you will see the temperature of the bottle with the carbon dioxide in it rising faster and higher. The bottles are like our...
I think it got stopped, did it?
The carbon dioxide in it rising faster and higher. The bottles are like our atmosphere. The lamps are like our sun. Most of the solar radiation reaching the Earth is absorbed by the surface and atmosphere, which in turn radiates energy out towards space as infrared energy, heat. Most most of the heat energy from the surface is then absorbed by the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and radiated back down toward the surface. The more greenhouse gases we create, the more heat is absorbed and sent back toward the surface to cause further warming. This recycled heat does more than bump up the thermometer. Warm air has the capacity to hold more moisture, and water vapor is itself a greenhouse gas. So there's even more warmth, which means the planet's entire hydrological cycle, the water cycle, is affected. More evaporation, more precipitation, more extremes in general. For nearly 1 million years, the CO2 content of the atmosphere moved within a natural bandwidth. But during the Industrial Revolution, humans started burning fossil fuels in increasingly large amounts. In fact, now, that's around 7 billion of us, rely on carbon-based fuels for 85% of our energy. Humans currently produce around 35 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year. About 55% of that is absorbed by the ocean, land, and vegetation, while the rest remains in the atmosphere. Most of that excess comes from burning fossil fuels, and more than half of the emissions come from power plants and factories, while about a third comes from our various forms of transportation. If we continue the current trajectory, by the time our children reach middle age, the levels of atmospheric CO2 will reach twice that of our planet's long-time natural levels. That is why we're already seeing the temperature increase, and we're already seeing the consequences. 4% more moisture in the atmosphere above the ocean is enough to transition to a new normal. Dramatic weather events, floods, storms, droughts, fires, they're all happening at a frequency and intensity we've never experienced throughout human history. In other words, climate change. We've set this chain in motion, but the truly cataclysmic changes can be prevented if we act now.
Carbon dioxide is not a harmful gas, it is a harmless gas.
The first step is to separate fact from fiction. This climate science is no longer a matter of opinion, politics, or dogma. So let's not let a few dirty energy companies fool us or slow us down. There are now increasing numbers of affordable, clean tech energy sources, all available to us in limitless supply. By embracing them, we will create jobs and improve the economy. The current climate crisis is reality. We can't wish it away. What we can do is cease the debate and the denial and move on to solutions together.
Okay, so first, it's a great video. Actually, if anybody wants to use it in your school, it's Bill Nye is the scientist guy, and you can find it on the Climate Reality website. Now, I read somewhere that JIN's purpose or objectives is to really inform, then inspire, then engage, and then act. So we're going to look at that first. We're going to look at the information, make sure you understand, then I hope to inspire you, engage you, and then get you to act. So let's look at the basics. I mean, I know we talked about CO2 emissions, metric tons of CO2, and it's hard to understand and really feel what 1 ton of CO2 looks like. With 1 metric ton of CO2 looks like, it's about that much CO2 gas inside that high cube. So you have about a 26.8 meter huge cube filled with CO2 gas. That would be what 1 ton, a metric ton of CO2 would look like. Now, to put it in perspective, we as humans, per day, we emit about 18 kilograms of CO2 globally, on average. That's quite a bit, because we're about 7 billion people. So if we take 18 of those huge spheres of CO2 about 1 meter wide, will be what we emit per capita per day. So you do the math. If each one of us emit about 18 kilograms of CO2, times 7 billion of all of us, times 365 days, that gives you that much. And that equivals to that much energy. So the amount of CO2 we're putting into our atmosphere equivals to the amount of 400,000 Hiroshima's atomic bomb of energy. That's a lot of carbon. And our atmosphere is very, very thin. So we know we've been talking about, and you saw this on the video, that CO2, as CO2 increases, so does the temperature. They're directly related. And we can see this on the graph. The blue graph is CO2. The white graph is actually temperature. So they're directly related to each other. As CO2 goes up, so does the temperature goes up. And this has been the case for the last 800,000 years. Until probably not probably, but after the Industrial Revolution took over and we started to dump extra carbon into the atmosphere, and we're about that way, we're about that high. We're about 400 parts per million of CO2 into an atmosphere. Now, yes, CO2 is not a harmful gas. No, it's true. But it is a heat-trapping gas. And the more we put into the atmosphere, the more heat gets trapped into those molecules, and the radiation that comes in from the sun cannot get out. So, at our current rate, in about 40 more so years, that's where we're going to be at, about 600 parts per million, if we continue as business as usual. So as CO2 increases, so does the temperature, and we can see that, again, very directly related to each other. And all that carbon and all that increase in temperatures are really affecting our global ecosystems. And we're seeing temperatures never seen before all over the world. 53 degrees. I live in the UAE, in the Emirates, and I know what 50 degrees feels like. But it's been pretty much, we've been breaking records all over the world. And these are just temperature records across the United States in 2012. So the red dots are record brokens and the yellow dots are records high. Now, and I'm going to put several pictures in perspective, but I just wanted you to know that this particular airplane, sitting on the runway at Reagan National, the actual flight could not take off because their tires got melted. In Australia, it's gotten so hot that they have to add a new color to the map because it gets up to 54 degrees now in some places of Australia. And of course, that affects all of us. It affects wildlife, it affects people. And climate change is not about political story, it's about people's story, it's about us. And this actually was taken in Alaska in 2013. 96 degrees in Alaska. That could have been Florida or South Beach. And if you look at the map here, you can see how hot it got in Alaska in 2003. We're talking about 38, close to 32 degrees Celsius. So where is all that global warming going to? Well, mostly it's going to our oceans. About 93% of all that heat is being trapped into our oceans. And that affects ecosystems, marine ecosystems, but it also affects our sea levels, it affects climate weather patterns, it affects a lot more than just our ecosystems on the sea. So this is also related to heat and CO2 in our oceans. Again, as the CO2 goes up, so is the temperature of our oceans. And this is what 400 parts per million where we are looks like, and what we should be, around 350 parts per million. And we start seeing that as the CO2 increases in our oceans, we see, obviously, acidification, we see blanching of our corals, and we start to see the entire ecosystems collapse. Now, there is a direct relationship between sea temperature and weather patterns, as I said, specifically with storms. We've heard that storms are directly related to the intensity, I should say, of storms are directly related into temperature. And if you can look at this map, you can see the red, on the red legend on the bottom, it's close to 5 degrees than normal. And you see the sea surface temperature anomalies, especially on the upper eastern side of Canada and the United States, and also in the Mediterranean and down here across from Argentina. And this was in 2012. In October 20, the 29th of October, 2 days ago actually, it was one of the anniversaries. Did anybody remember what happened the day after, on October 30th? Hurricane Sandy happened. So the actual sea temperature around the shoreline of New Jersey and New York was about close to 5 degrees higher than normal when Hurricane Sandy passed by. Now, everybody remember what it looked like, but if you don't remember, I want to put a little clip of the movie I told you to begin with, that Mr. Go anticipated what was going to happen to New York City, and then we're going to see what actually happened close to 7 years later.
The scientists could predict precisely how much water could reach the levees in New Orleans. The area where the World Trade Center Memorial is to be located would be underwater.
This is going to be a big and powerful storm. Millions of people are going to be affected all across the eastern seaboard, and everybody is taking appropriate preparations. Our thoughts and prayers go out to all people who are potentially affected.
This extreme storm is related to the warmer ocean temperatures. Tropical storms get their energy from the oceans. Warmer oceans give it more energy.
Explosion at a consolidated Edison power plant.
More than 1 million people in 11 states are already without power.
Breaking news now from the borough of Queens, New York, where a fire there has destroyed at least 50 homes.
The Battery Tunnel in Lower Manhattan, this gets you out of the city. The tunnel is totally flooded.
And now this water is rushing over the edge of Lower Manhattan.
This was a devastating storm, maybe the worst that we have ever experienced. Many people have lost their homes. People have lost their lives.
The Hudson River, downtown Manhattan, was literally pouring into the ground zero site. All the infrastructure we have in this city is below ground. We don't have any built-in pumping capacity in the tunnel system. The electrical equipment in many cases is in the tunnel system, and now you have a serious problem. But I would expect a situation like this to occur, and I think we need a systemic solution long-term. As New Yorkers, we've gone through dark times before, and we know struggles, and we know crisis, and we come back even stronger. We work together, we work as a team, and the challenge here for us is not just to build back, but to build back better than before. Climate change is a reality. Extreme weather is a reality.
those are very powerful images, and this is how actually the New Jersey shoreline looked like after Sandy passed by. Those are very, very powerful stories and powerful images, and I really have to relate this to what I saw yesterday, because as I was flying into Ezeiza yesterday into the airport, I could see all the neighborhoods flooded around the airport. And you know that the last 2 days we've seen really powerful storms here in Buenos Aires. And there's a really direct linkage between extreme weather events and climate change and the severity of it. And I want to make sure you understand why. Why is it that we see these downpours, these mega storms form, and what is actually happening in our hydrological cycle? So we know that, when we heard this on a video, that as temperature increases, we hold more water vapor into our air, into our atmosphere. And when we hold more water vapor, we create more precipitation, whether it's on liquid form or solid form. So it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When we have extreme temperatures and the temperature continues to increase, we see a lot more drastic climate variability and climate extremes. So warmer air can hold a lot more vapor, we just said that. And each additional 1 degree of temperature that it increases, we have the capacity, or the atmosphere have the capacity to hold almost 7% more increase, about 7% more water vapor. So the atmosphere gets extremely charged. And everything gets intensified. And as I said, these rainstorms or snowstorms get bigger and more intensified, and we get more frequent floods. And this is what happens. This is what happened yesterday here, day before yesterday. We have seen extreme temperatures here in Buenos Aires that we've never seen before. We broke some records in temperatures here in Buenos Aires, and the downpour, the massive downpour effect that happens is directly caused to the increased temperature that we saw in the past few days, and the amount of extreme water being held into the atmosphere. And this is happening all over the world, not only here. We've seen it happen in Pakistan, in India. We've seen it happening in Beijing. We've seen it happening in many parts of the world, in Europe, in Russia, Czech Republic, Greece, here again, and Canada. It's also happening all over. And these are the headlines from the day before yesterday's storm. El Tigre, evacuaron de emergencia 130 alumnos de un campamento. Some of you were there yesterday. This happened the day before yesterday. So you could have been on a normal day, and all of a sudden we get this massive cell of water downpour, that much water without previous notice. But there's an actual opposite effect. As we get these downpours, we also see intensified drought. And that could be a little bit contradictory for a lot of people, and people don't understand why is it that we get, downpours, but at the same time we get intensified droughts. So, I want to make sure that I understand that you understand that. And what happens is, as the temperature increases, the temperature actually drains all that moisture into the soil, and it may get really dry in one area, but then in several kilometers down the road you get a downpour. So, and that is why we consistently talk about climate change and climate variability, not so much about global warming anymore. And when we have droughts in many other countries, in many other parts of the world, currently right now, these are from 2012, but we've seen that in major actual key places where we have a lot of agriculture, we're seeing extreme to exceptional drought. And take a look at Brazil and how the deep color, it tells you that in a good part of the Amazon and in Brazil we have extreme to exceptional drought. Same thing with the western side of the United States, and we know that California and the west part of the US and many places are going through extreme drought situations. As I said, in the Amazon, we're currently experiencing several droughts. This one actually was a extreme drought from 2012, but currently right now we have some places that we have actually extreme drought situations. But at the same time, another thing that happens is like with increased CO2, we also see increased drought and we also see increased amount of fires. I was looking at a TV show, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a Showtime series called The Years of Living Dangerously. And it's by James Cameron, who actually did the Avatar and who actually did Titanic. He did a series who won an Emmy all about climate change, about climate stories. And one of the people that actually is shown in that series is Arnold Schwarzenegger, who used to be the governor of California. And he takes a specific interest into the wildfire season in California. And what used to be a season is now the current normal. And California does not have an actual fire season anymore. It's actually all year round in most cases. Now, sometimes these fires are so massive that you can even see them from outer space. And this picture was taken by NASA in 2013. And we actually see some huge fires in Singapore as well that were choking other countries because of the amount of smoke released from the wildfires. Now, we know that the Arctic has been shrinking, and that was then in 1984. And this one is from 2012. Soon we could be probably Arctic free and lose pretty much all of our ice coverage. Now, we know that as the temperature increases, there are a lot of other global systems that can be disrupted, and one of them is actually our food supply system. Now, the drought actually affects crops all over the world, and specifically here in the United States, or there in the United States, we saw that as the temperature increases, and once you pass the threshold of about 89 to 90 degrees, corn stops growing, and photosynthesis shuts down. And this actually has a huge effect, obviously, not only on our food supply for ourselves, but also food supplies for animals, and it could be disruption all over our food chain. But as the food supplies gets disrupted, so our water supply gets disrupted. And we know that currently 70% of our water use is for agriculture. So everything becomes to be a cycle, a vicious cycle. The more hot it is, the more water we'll need, and vice versa. Now, we are growing things. As our population continues to grow, we're growing food and in places that normally would never grow food. And we're actually putting so much strain in our aquifers that in some places it's pretty much getting, we're sinking aquifers by a meter every day for the amount of water that we're using just to water our crops. Another global system that is very vulnerable to climate change is our health. Our global health is directly related to our climate. And with the amount of CO2 increase, we're also going to see an increase on pests and plant pests and vector diseases. And we see that mosquitoes actually thrive as CO2 increases. We get more mosquitoes. And according to the World Health Organization, climate-related death due to drought, heat waves, and increased dengue and malaria is about 150,000 a year. That's a big number. And have you heard of the chikungunya yet? Okay, so I'm from Dominican Republic. That's where I grew up, in an island. And before we used to have dengue, we used to have malaria, but we never had chikungunya. I went back to the DR a few months ago, and pretty much everybody had the chikungunya. So there's an increase in all these pests, and it's actually making it downwards, not only on tropical regions anymore, but as south as Argentina and Brazil and many other places. Now, we're going to become allergic to climate change too, because with increase of CO2, increased pollen happens as well. So in 2010, there was a study done about the amount of grains of pollen per cubic meter. It was about 8,400 per cubic meter, and by 2040, we're expected to increase to 21,000 square grains of pollen per cubic meter. That's a huge number. So we're going to have allergies all over the place. Now, this doesn't make it into the headlines either. I love the videos that I saw, and you're right, you know, the media is not covering what is important to us. And 2 million people, 2 billion people are dying of related climate change diseases, all directly related to climate change, whether it's from respiratory diseases, whether it's from vector diseases, whether it's directly because of a flood, because of a drought, because of a storm. But we lose that many people to climate change, and you don't hear that on the news. Now, climate change causes lives, and it costs us a lot of things, but it also costs us money. And you can see by how costly hurricanes have been just in the US in billions of dollars. And actually, Sandy came out to be close to $70 billion in losses for the US. That's a lot of money. And we don't see that many people doing much about it. It costs us a lot. Climate change should be at the forefront of everybody's target mission statement. It should be really on the front headlines of every newspaper. Because in the US alone, in 2012, it cost the US $100 billion. And that's fact. $100 billion climate change related loss for the US. Now we know there's a better way, and we know we need to change. And we need to change the way we go about using our energy. And we know the solutions, and we have them at hand, but we know, and we must know, that the time is now. We don't have that time to waste, and that's our most accurate watch ever. We have a choice between a carbon pollution-based economy or a clean energy economy. And if you know him, if a 14-year-old boy can build a windmill in a village in Malawi, so can we. And in the US, there are some good stories. 50 million homes were powered by wind energy. And the cost of photovoltaics is coming down. It used to be pretty expensive, but now it's coming down significantly. And we know that in the US now, every 4 minutes, somebody's putting up a solar panel. So as we see the amount of solar PV installations going up, we know somebody got word sooner that they needed to put their solar panels up. I don't know who told them. Maybe the Pope has a direct connection to up and above, because the Vatican is going solar. And they are actually going to become probably one of the first sustainable countries in the world. And President Obama is doing something about it. He is actually putting in place a lot of initiatives, both in the private and public sector. And one of the great initiatives is that our mileage for our cars is going to be a standard mileage per gallon by 2025. So we're going to get about 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025. All cars produced in the US must give you that much efficiency. So there's a new reason for hope. Not everything is bad. I was recently in the US in September for the People's Climate March. Anybody hear about that? Good. It was amazing. And we have about 400,000 people attended a march with us. That's, for me, that was a new reason for hope. But every day I have new reasons for hope. Last week I had a conference that I organized with No Planeta B, and we had about 500 students from all over Peru, from colleges around Peru, wanted to do something about climate. Wanted to do something about climate change. Because Peru is the third most vulnerable country in the world. And a lot of people ask me, well, what can I do? Well, what can you do? There's a lot of things we can all do. Each of us have a responsibility to do something. And there are many things that you can do. First of all, speak up. Use your voice. You're using it, you're doing it, you're already leaders. You are here because you are worried about a global issue. And this is your future we're talking about. Raise your hand if you have a mobile phone. If you have a phone, raise your hand. Okay, back down. Raise your hand if you're on Twitter. Okay, back down. Raise your hand if you are on Facebook. Okay, me too. All right. So, important hashtags. Hashtag act on climate. Hashtag COP20. Hashtag actions, not words. So, I challenge you to do this. To tweet or post and use your voice. Now, if you can, if you have internet, I don't know how internet is right now here, but if not later on break, if not tonight when you get to the hotel, you have the power to make things happen. And you can tweet. Climate change is the biggest threat and risk to my future. It's time we act on climate, on COP20 and on COP21. Student at GIN Buenos Aires Conference 2014. Raise your hand if you're going to do it today. Okay, all right, I'm counting on you. So, one of the reasons here is I hope I inspire you. You want to see it again? Okay. Cool. All right, so that's the tweet. And when she gets her picture done, we can continue. So that's one thing you can do about it. So believe in the power of your voice. The more noise we make, and the more accountability we demand from our leaders, the more changes we'll see. But not all changes need to be at a massive level. We can start with changes right here at home, right here in our schools. Because the day we begin to be silent about things is the day we start really, the world starts to end. So we really need to be doing something about it. And we have an opportunity coming up. In Lima, we're going to be hosting the 20th United Nations Climate Change Conference of Parties. And that, what it means is like all the country delegations of the world are coming to Lima for the 20th time to try to come up to a binding climate agreement. And we're very fortunate that it's actually going to be happening in Lima where I live. Because we're going to be actually trying to demand our leaders to come to a climate agreement to curb greenhouse gases. Now, as I said, it's a climate binding agreement that needs to be inclusive. It needs to be legally binding. All countries, by consensus, need to approve the actual agreement. That means that developed and underdeveloped countries must sign the agreement, and that's not easy task. As I said, this is the 20th time, and hopefully we're going to have one more chance to get it signed and finally curb greenhouse gases so we can get our actual temperature under 2 degrees. So what we can do as GINers, what can you do as GINers? What can you contribute? So we definitely need to deepen our commitment and make consumer choices that reduce our energy use. Consider the environmental impact of all the things that we do, all the things that we buy. Because we always leave an impact everywhere we go. Just flying here created an impact. So maybe we should all be offsetting our impact every time we fly somewhere, every time we go on vacation. And obviously practice what we preach and walk the talk. And bring others to the conversations, because a leader does not create followers. Leaders create other leaders, and that's what you are, all of you are here today. So, now we go to the power of action. As I said, we were gonna inform you, inspire you, hopefully you're inspired, and now we must act. You started acting with your tweet or your post, using your voice. Now I saw this quote one day and I really liked it, because really, ideas without actions are just dreams, and it's true. Really, to see change, we must act, and actions do change the world. So a lot of people are going to come back to you and say, well, climate change is a natural thing, it happens, it's, the Earth cycle, and blah, 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 blah. And now you know that it's not true. Yes, the weather has changed in the past millions of years, but now its drastic changes are made by us. So that's actually a myth, and our reality is here now. And if you actually hear somebody say, well, el clima está loco, and you go like, yeah, right, el clima está loco, you can actually say this. It's global warming. The clima is not really crazy, it's us. So, the third thing we can do, don't give up. As I said, tell your leaders, and we're going to be telling them in COP20 and COP21. Tell your teachers, tell your principals, tell your superintendents that you must do something about climate change. What are we doing as a school? Are we minimizing our impact? Are we minimizing our carbon footprint? Let them know you support this. Let them know you strongly want this. This is your future. So, going back to how we started, can school be drivers of change? What's our role? So, Mandela once said, and this is one of my favorite quotes, education is the most powerful tool to really change the world. And I actually believe that. Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. So what is a green school? A green school is a building or a facility that creates a healthy environment that is conducive to learning while saving energy and saving our resources. Well, that's what we all want. We want to make sure we use our resources wisely. And that's what a green school is. And these are just some facts and some trends and some numbers that in just the United States, 16 million kids go to school every day. So that's a huge, huge, huge impact. And just on behavior-based strategies, you don't need to invest too much money. You can see a reduction of energy between 20 to 30%, just on habit breaking, just on behavior-based strategies. So that's an easy thing to do. And we know also that this costs money. I mean, schools spend about 20% of their actual budget just to cover lighting costs. But why sustainability fails in some schools? Because of the budgetary constraint and the cost cutting. Because a lot of people think it has high upfront cost for improvement. Because of lack of leadership and buy-in. Well, that shouldn't happen. And the lack of broader community involvement and knowledge, especially regarding health issues. We're not really looking at the big picture. We're not. Because if we spend that much money on actually buying technology, because technology supposedly, and I'm not saying I'm against it, but probably because technology enhances your performance and your student learning. Green schools do too. Green schools actually can enhance your performance because you get better daylight, because you get a better indoor quality environment. Because the acoustics of a green school can boost your learnings, and because your comfortable indoor temperature can actually help you actually focus on what you're learning. Not only do we reduce our footprint environmentally and sustainably, but we also enhance your learning experience and we actually reduce costs. So it's a win-win for green schools to happen. So I have one wish. And this is a challenge for Paul, for Linda, for all superintendents, and for all of you, a message to bring home. How can we empower change? How can we actually drive change as a school? Or better yet, as a region? Wouldn't it be great that you, as Ginners, as part of your Global Issues Network, can actually drive significant change? And you can. We don't need to wait for governments to decide. We can start changing now. So why not signing the June Declaration of curbing greenhouse gases and show that we're the leaders in COP20 and COP21? We can do it. How it gets done. So, as an example, if we would cut about 20% of greenhouse gases in the ASA region, we can cut about 111,440 metric tons of CO2. Remember what 1 metric ton of CO2 looked like at the beginning? This is how we can cut, if the entire region, we can cut about 20% of that. And that would equivalent probably about, taking out of the roads, about close to 4,600 vehicles. So it's a pretty significant change. So we can drive change from our schools and from our regions. So if we take that amount of CO2 out of our atmosphere, we would actually be doing a great thing to our environment. So what do you say? How about a June Declaration of curbing greenhouse gases? Would that something that you'd be able to sign in for? Would you put your hands to it? Where are my leaders? Okay. Linda and Paul probably gonna kill me. What are you doing? So anyway, I want to leave you with two of my favorite quotes. And actually, I saw that Paul's quote. You like that quote too? But another one is from Mandela, and it says pretty much that sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great, and you can be that great generation. And the last one is, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed Junners can do to change the world. It's the only thing it's ever has. But one more thing before you go. You know when people tell you in all this praise, keep calm, recycle, keep calm, move on, keep calm, and party on. You know what? Don't keep calm. Don't. It's time to wake up. Don't wait till the last minute. Don't wait till the sea levels rise. Act now. Because I'd rather raise hell and change the world. Thank you.